स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः। पवित्रं चरितं यस्याः पवित्रं जीवनं तथा पवित्रता स्वरूपिण्यै तस्यै देव्यै नमो नमः। नमः श्रीयतिराजाय विवेकानन्दसूरये सच्चित्सुखस्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
So, welcome all of you to the Love India Forum, beautifully conducted by Vivekananda Kendra Vedic Vision Foundation of Kodungalur. We will start with our salutation to Swamiji and start brooding on those beautiful elevating thoughts on Swamiji, which itself is a meditation, imparting to our mind very sublime impressions. Just like different factors in nature produce the weather effect, different thought currents produce the weather effect in the mind. The psychological effect of joy or sorrow or boredom, it comes because of the bits and pieces generated by the different types of thoughts we gather. And the quality of Vivekananda's thoughts are always elevating, scintillating and emotionally fulfilling, and makes our mind more sattvic, calm and joyful. Om Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukhaswarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. Om Aim Swami Vivekanandaya Namaha. Om Aim Swami Vivekanandaya Namaha. Namo Namaha. There was a gap of one Saturday. I had gone to Chennai, so I could not meet all of you. And today we are meeting again after the last week's talk. And today is a beautiful day, the second day of the new year. And it's carrying such a beautiful memory of January 1st, especially for those who are associated with Swami Vivekananda and his Guru, Sri Ramakrishna. It's a very fortunate coincidence that I had chosen this topic, Divine Touch. I didn't remember at that time that it will coincide with the January 1st celebrated as Kalpataru Day by the people associated with Ramakrishna Vivekananda. It was on that day that Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, assumed the form of Kalpataru, or rather not assumed, expressed the innate nature of a divine being to be a Kalpataru. Kalpataru means whatever you wish, it will come. So that day at the Kashipur garden on the 1st January, the very gateway of the new year, Sri Ramakrishna, in a very, very ecstatic mode, gave that masterly divine spiritual touch to all the aspirants who came to him on that day. And the exclusive thing was that most of those disciples who came to him on that day to receive his touch of grace, the divine touch, they were all not monastic disciples, but they were all the householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. In the Viveka Chudamani, Shankaracharya describes this divine grace both from the Guru as well as from the Ishtadevata. And Sri Ramakrishna was a combination of Ishtadevata cum Guru. It's a ahetuka daya sindhu. The grace and the blessing comes to you, the touch of the divine grace comes to you without any reason, most illogical. Sometimes it may seem insensible to common folks, but beyond the ordinary range of our vision, divine being has a transcendental vision which encompasses the region beyond the time limit of past, present and future. And from there, his actions seem very relevant, sensible and most logical and reasonable. And it's a very, very direct reaction and response from the divine, and it's infallible and accurate. You cannot find any blame, though it appears to be an unreasonable grace. That is unreasonable from the point of view of short-sighted persons like us who are contained within the limits of the time as past, present and future. Sri Ramakrishna could see the entire gamut of time. That's why he could predict who was what in the previous birth just by looking at them. So that great power of Sri Ramakrishna, he really revealed himself as that Kalpataru and blessed everybody, the divine touch. And suddenly it struck me yesterday that I have chosen this topic sometime before to talk on Swamiji as a divine touch, in the sense that Swamiji himself received a divine touch many times in his life, and he also imparted his divine touch to many people who came in contact with him. And these are all some of the thrilling spiritual adventures in the life of Swami Vivekananda. Sometimes they are very hair-raising and sometimes they are very uplifting to listen to those stories where just by mere touch, Vivekananda could impart the great sense of sattvic feeling, great sense of God being present, even in the mind of an Nastika, atheist. So today we are having the topic for our discussion, the divine touch. We started the whole process of meditation on Swamiji with this concept of relation. That is, life is relation. To live means to be related to something in this world. Without being in relation, we can't live. We are related with people around. We are related with nature. Knowingly or unknowingly, we are related with the Creator. And we are related with so many things, with our own mind, our own thoughts. And we have to see whether we are related with ourselves. Most of the time we find we are such a boring person that we don't want to relate with ourselves. And therefore we seek television, we seek newspapers, we seek storybooks, and a lot of different avenues to escape from ourselves when we are alone. How do you relate with yourself? Do you feel joyful when alone? Or do you feel your company is a boring company for yourself? And if you feel that your company is boring to yourself, always we have the company of holy persons, the company of holy scriptures, and the company of inspiring stories and incidents from the lives of great heroes. So to be related is to live. Only dead persons do not relate with anybody. So how are we getting related was a topic we were discussing. And how to get related is one of the essential aspects of life. The way we get related to people around us, to our country. How are we related with our work? Is our work such a boredom or a drudgery? Do you feel working in the office is a punishment? And this relationship is a great mirror which reveals us as we are, not as we want us to be. If the mirror revealing our image is exactly as we want to be, then it's a great thing. It's a very positive achievement for us. But in the mirror, we can see we are as we are. Every relationship reveals very clearly, impartially, without any prejudice, what we are as we are. That is what we require. An unprejudiced view about ourselves for self-analysis and self-development. Most of the time, that's why we find enemies are more better. A man who criticizes you is more better than a friend, because a friend always pleases you, and therefore he says everything is all right. Whereas sometimes you may feel that things are not all right. So we want a honest entity to reveal what is with us and how we are. So relationship, as we study, how did I behave with a beggar? How did I behave with a rich man? How did I respond to a poor man? What was my response to atheist? What is my response to a politician? All these things in relation will reveal how we respond. Our response and our reactions show to us our mentality and our total personality. And looking at that in an impartial way, we can slowly analyze ourselves and make the necessary modifications. Just like looking at a mirror, a man or a woman combs his hair, puts her bindi, dresses herself. Similarly, through the mirror of human relationship with the country and all different avenues of relation, we can make ourselves more and more beautiful, and the cosmetic makeup of change in our conduct, change in our behavior, change in our thought process can be acted upon by this beautiful mirror called relationship. And every relation has got its own beautiful touch. Some of the relations will have a sympathetic touch. Sometimes the touch is of compassion. Sometimes the touch is of mercy. Sometimes you have the touch of gratitude. Sometimes you have the touch of motherliness. Sometimes the relation brings out the touch of thankfulness. Sometimes the relation brings the touch of patriotic feeling. Sometimes it brings out the touch of service, seva, seeing some person suffering during the pandemic. Natural response of being of service, being of some use to them, seva, comes into our mind, and in that we can study ourselves. Suppose we find that any time we are lacking in our human relationship, how are we to find out what is the correct relationship? And that is why we require ideals and idols. Not the idol in the form of an image. Even the idol in the form of image also is conveying beautiful ideals, like Rama's image. It's only an image and idol, but behind the idol, the ideal of Rama's behavior and conduct. For example, being a king of the country, when somebody doubted Sita's purity, how did Rama relate himself to that incident, that event, and how did he respond? So how to respond to the life situations, we can learn from great people, great personalities. Not necessary that we should always imitate them. Imitation is not what is being asked. What we have to learn is how did they respond, in what way I can modify my behavior to suit to that response. One easy way to understand is to put the question, if I am the counterpart who is dealing with me, what would be the response that I will be expecting from him? Suppose I am a poor man comes to me and then just I kick them out telling, get out from here. You are a lazy people, you can't work, you are a lazy man, and all those ways we can ill-treat him. Now I have to put myself in the place of that poor man. Situations of life are not always favorable to everybody. It can happen to me also. Any accident can make me a handicapped man and I lose my job. Perhaps my wife and the family members desert me. In that critical, crucial situation when I am totally down, the whole nature dumps me. Normally, I will be expecting great amount of sympathy, cooperation and help from the counterpart of the world, the other people. So, when other people come to us, we also should be able to respond. That is why Jesus told, do unto others what you want others to do unto you. So in the life of great people, we find how they respond to other people. One small incident I will tell you before we enter into the subject proper. There was a great king called Punjab Kesari Raja Ranjit Singh. He was a king of Punjab and he was a very magnanimous personality and a very magnificent personality. One day as he was coming on a horseback, few stones hit on his forehead and it started bleeding. The soldiers got angry, and when they went in search, they found an old lady of 84 years. She was throwing stones on a tree, and few of those stones came and hit Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji on the forehead, and it started bleeding. The soldiers caught that old lady, brought him up to the king and told, Maharaja, this is a Raja Aparada. This is a crime done to royalty, to the kingdom itself, to the king himself. So it desires that such a serious punishment. So here we can see how the great king, though he had enormous power to punish her, how did he respond? Did power corrupt him? Power is always a corruptive element if not handled with discretion or discrimination, or if it is not handled with a patient mind. Maharaja Ranjit Singh looked at the old lady of 84 and he asked, Mother, what made you so angry? What was my offense that you hit me with stones and it is bleeding now? The old lady, so pathetic was her condition, she was shivering. With folded hands, she told Maharaja, my son, why should I get angry and why should I throw stones at you? If I am angry, I would have directly spoken to you and expressed myself. But then, Mother, why did you throw stones at me? And the old lady, weeping, she told, 4 days I couldn't get food. So I was throwing stones on the tree to get some fruits. This fruit is called Elandapadam in Tamil and it is called bear in Hindi. This is what Shabari gave to Rama. So few of the stones might have come and hit you, but it was not to my knowledge. I didn't know that the stones are going so far to hit you and you have come on the horseback, perhaps it has hit you. This is now the very touching incident takes place. Now Maharaja Ranjit Singh gets down from the horseback and is asking that old lady, dear mother, when you threw stones and hit the tree with these stones, what did the tree do to you? How did the tree respond to you? And the old lady told, I got 4 or 5 fruits, bare fruits. Then Raja folds his hands and he says, if the dead inanimate tree being hit by a stone can give you 4 or 5 fruits to satisfy your hunger, do you think Maharaja Ranjit Singh Bahadur of Punjab will be so low to punish you? He told, hey soldiers, give her 100 gold coins and relieve her from poverty forever. This is superb behavior, fantastic touch of compassion, fantastic touch of the heart, where the Raja with all power and the status to punish that lady ultimately rewarded her, understanding with great compassion that it was hunger that made her throw the stones and not that she was really angry. But the soldiers were vehemently demanding royal punishment. And here is where we can judge Raja. We are judging Raja, but if Raja wants to judge himself, this relationship of his response will be the mirror for him to judge. Had Raja got agitated, if he had ordered the lady to be put behind the bars, if at night, if he meditates on his own actions, which he had done throughout the day, the actions will reveal that the Raja had no sympathy, no compassion for the poor and downtrodden. His relationship is sickly and negative and unhealthy. So, in the lives of great men, we get a clue, a formula, an equation, how to modify. Not exactly that we should imitate, and not necessary that we totally make it a copy of that. The response of ours will depend on, as Holy Mother told, time, place and person. Maybe some poor men who are cheating, they don't require our compassion, but we can control ourselves intelligently, just to smile and get off. Now coming to Swami Vivekananda, he being a spiritual person, all his touches have got the glimpse of divinity, spirituality and purity in it. By spirituality, we mean the touch of the spirit. Spirit means that which is everlasting, which is the inner nature of man, and that is called God, permanent, joyful, and indestructible. So that is a totality. Spirituality means totality. It contains all the touches a full human being can impart to other people or other persons or other elements coming in contact with him. So in the life of Sri Swami Vivekananda, we find how he has given this divine touch to other people. Some places it is a maternal touch, motherly touch. Some places it is the Guru Kripa, touch of the great master. Some places it is the touch of compassion. And some places it is the touch of brotherliness, same-sightedness, which we will have a glimpse of when we pass through the different life incidents of Swamiji, how Vivekananda's touch has got a classic signature of its own. Before we enter into the divine touch of Vivekananda to others, we can have a glimpse of how Vivekananda himself, from the very beginning of his birth, had the touch of the divine in his life. Swamiji, being a spiritual man, always in love with mankind, his touch is a total, whole, holy touch. But before his touch to others, as I told now, we will just see three incidents where Vivekananda himself received this touch, which ultimately got imparted to others. The very beginning of Swami Vivekananda's life comes with a beautiful, one of the most mystical thrillers of the modern world, Ramakrishna Vivekananda, and the experiences and the visions they had. From those visions, we will take the first vision of Sri Ramakrishna, revealing who was Narendranath Swami Vivekananda. How was Vivekananda born to this earth? Sri Ramakrishna says that this Narendranath is one among the Saptarishis of the Saptarishi Mandalam. This is one of the great things about Sri Ramakrishna's life. Most of the beliefs and the things which we accept in our Hinduism, which many mock at, laugh at, and call it as a false belief or superstition, Sri Ramakrishna came to verify and give authentication to all those things. Is Saptarishi Mandalam one of the concoction of a Hindu mind? Maybe there are 7 stars, the constellation is there. But is there a Saptarishi Mandalam really existing as it is told in the Indian literature, spiritual literature? Sri Ramakrishna's life experiences has clearly shown that such things exist, and all these things which Hindus fondly remember and hold on to are not at all the fictions of the mind or superstitions, but they are experienced at the mystical heights of spiritual realization. Sri Ramakrishna one day found that his mind was soaring high in samadhi along a luminous path. Soon it transcended the stellar universe and entered the subtler region of ideas. As it ascended higher and higher, Sri Ramakrishna found on both the sides of the way ideal forms of gods and goddesses. His mind then reached the outer limits of that region, where a luminous barrier separated the sphere of relative existence, that is, the existence with forms, from that of the absolute, the formless. Crossing that barrier, the mind of Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, entered the transcendental realm where no corporeal being was visible. Even the gods dared not peep into that sublime realm, because these forms get merged when we transcend more and more into the oneness of the whole reality. Even these gods dared not peep into that sublime realm, but they had to be content to keep their seats little below. This is where the Devi Devatas live. Then next moment, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly saw 7 venerable sages, the Sapta Rishis, seated there, drowned in samadhi. It then occurred to Sri Ramakrishna that these sages must have surpassed not only men but even gods in knowledge and holiness, in renunciation and love. You have to watch this beautiful statement that man can transcend the so-called gods like Indra, Chandra, Varuna, etc. That is, a realized Rishi, a Brahma Jnani, is more a super person or a superior person than the so-called Devi Devatas. These Devi Devatas are under the command and control of the so-called realized souls. Lost in admiration, Sri Ramakrishna was reflecting on their greatness, looking at those 7 venerable sages, deeply drowned and engrossed in deep meditation. He was so impressed of their greatness. His mind went on reflecting how great these people must be. They are above gods also. At that time, he saw a piece of undifferentiated, luminous region where the 7 rishis were meditating, condensed into the form of a divine child, a very beautiful, tender divine child. The invisible, formless area where the 7 sages were meditating, it came together and condensed and assumed the form of a divine child. Then the child, slowly crawling, came to one of these sages, climbed on his lap, tenderly clasped his neck with his lovely little arms, and addressing that sage in a very sweet, melodious voice, attempted to drag and bring down his mind from the state of samadhi. Samadhi means total absorption, pinnacle of absorption. Man is totally lost. This magic touch of the divine child, this is where the first touch in the life of Swami Vivekananda takes place. The first time the divine touch comes to him. The magic touch roused that sage, on whose lap the child climbed, and put his tender hands on the shoulder of the sage. The mind of the sage, roused by the magic touch, came down from his superconscious state, and he fixed his unmoving, half-open gaze like a man meditating, not fully open, not fully closed, but deeply immersed inside, like a bird hatching an egg. The eyes are open, yet it is not fully open to the external world. So he fixed his unmoving, half-open gaze upon that wonderful child. His beaming countenance showed that the child must have been the treasure of his heart. Perhaps the Rishi was meditating on this child, which was his Ishtadevata. Indirectly, Satchidananda, the formless aspect of God, has taken the form in the form of that child, and it has put its tender hands on the shoulders of the Rishi. So the Rishi was deeply joyful, both when he was drowned in the meditation and also when he opened the eyes to see that the Ishtadevata, or the object which he was meditating upon, has taken the form of the child, and that was a treasure of his heart. In great joy, the strange divine child said to that sage, venerable sage, "I am going down, you too must come with me." The sage remained mute without any response, but his tender, beautiful look from his eyes expressed his assent. As he kept gazing on the child, he was again immersed in samadhi, because the God whom he was meditating inside the heart had assumed the form of a child, called him to come down to the earth to relieve the misery of the human beings. And when he saw that God, again he merged into samadhi. The God which was inside the heart took the form and came as a child. From samadhi he peeped at the beautiful child, and again the vision of the beautiful child sent him into the unending bliss of samadhi. But through his eyes, it is the touch of the eyes. It's called kripa drishti, kripa sparsham. Drishti sparsham, touching with his eyes. He gave the assent that you are asking me to come down, I will also come down, just like this. We do like that with our eyes, without speaking. As he kept gazing on the child, he was again immersed in samadhi. And Sri Ramakrishna says, I was surprised to find that a fragment of that Rishi, sage's body and mind was descending onto this earth in the form of an effulgent light. So beautiful, you see, it's some of the most mystical, thrilling adventures. No sooner I had seen Narendra Nath, I recognized him to be that sage whom I saw in the Saptarishi Mandala. So this is the first touch of the divine child, the touch of the Satchidananda, the touch of the infinite. In the eyes of Swami Vivekananda, we can always see the touch of the transcendental, the infinite Satchidananda. Eyes always in a meditative mood. Never you can see Vivekananda's eyes as if it is looking at this world. It seems that he is looking at this world, deeply affected by the miseries of the human beings. But whenever you look deeply into his eyes, you feel as if he is far away from us. The mind is deeply absorbed into the transcendental realm caused by the touch of the transcendental reality. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, he is a dhyana siddha, an adept in meditation. So as Sri Ramakrishna narrated this fantastic divine vision, spiritual vision, somebody asked, yes, when Narendranath entered the room, you could recognize him to be that sage. But who was that child? Sri Ramakrishna, who had no ego, gave a very, very silent nod, indicating that that child was nobody but Sri Ramakrishna himself. This is one of the beautiful, what I call as mystical thrillers. We read many of the English novels, Alistair MacLean's Guns of Navarone, etc., which are real, which have come out as movies. They are all real thrilling action movies. But in the last century, as Roma Rolla calls the symphony of the universal soul, we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna and Vivekananda such fantastic and really thrilling, hair-raising spiritual adventures that we are left spellbound. There is nothing for us to answer. What so long we thought as imagination or something of a fiction from Hindu spiritual literature. Now Sri Ramakrishna, by his own tangible experience, clearly proves that Saptarishi Mandalam is existing. And there are 7 venerable sages, and one of them has come down to this earth as Narendranath, and he could clearly recognize that. Now, what will be our answer? Either we can tell in the boasting mode of a agnostic or astika, atheist, that all these things are all children's stories, and we have nothing to do with that. But in human life, our beliefs have their own effect of their touch on our mind. Whether we believe in ghost or not, if there is an innate belief in our mind, that belief, that idea has got its own effect, the touch of its effect on our mind and our personality and on all our actions. So here we find in the life of Swami Vivekananda, he comes with that divine touch. That is a touch of the transcendental reality. And during some of his lectures in the United States, and during those times when Swami Vivekananda was lecturing, United States also had this financial depression, economic breakdown, and many of the business people and the whole country had a sort of a mental collapse. People were suffering. And hearing the talks of Swami Vivekananda and Vedanta, they felt their whole mind was lifted to something unusual, a transcendental realm where the worldly miseries and the worries never touched them. For a few hours when they were listening to Swami Vivekananda, the powerful words and the effect of the spiritual touch caused by those words, this is the audio touch of listening to a realized soul. Their minds were lifted. One of the men who was a bank manager, and the whole bank was totally dissolved. He told, when I heard him talk about the Atman and the Brahman and the indivisible reality, I found, yes, after all, this is impermanent. This is Maya. And the reality inside me, the Satchidananda, oh, that man, the monk, the sannyasi from India gave me the transcendental touch of bliss. So that is how the great personalities leave their effect on the humanity. This is the first incident where we find Swami Vivekananda getting the touch of the divine. The second one is where we get the touch of the divine through his mother, Bhuvaneshwari Devi. This is the custom and culture of Indian ladies that they don't give birth to child just for the joy of the physical satisfaction. This is a very, very hard thing to digest nowadays. But in India, things were so intellectually thought out and so reasoned out that along with the emotion, there were rarefied intellectual reasoning behind that. So their whole married life was to produce quality citizens for the country, not just merely for the satisfaction of their physical appetites. That's why in one of the famous lectures, our women, Swami Vivekananda very boldly declares, we don't call him an Aryan child who is born to the lust during the dark hours of the night. So in India, child is born between a father and mother consciously, valiantly, and with great prayers and a great austerity, so that the product they are bringing is going to be an asset and it is going to serve the society in one of the most marvelous ways. We see it happening in the life of Markandeya. We saw it happening in the life of Shankaracharya. And most of the avatars, Rama, also came out of prayer, not out of the desire's satisfaction. Not for satisfying the desire, they did it consciously. Lavakusha, they all came with total consciousness and total choice, with the whole mind alert and the whole awareness intact that they are doing it as an act of holiness. So that was what lent great purity and great enormity to the children they were born, making them all as stupendous personalities. In common with the mothers of the world, over a long period, Bhuvaneshwari Devi didn't have a child. She longed for a son to carry on the family tradition, which is natural in our Hindu custom, to be the link brought out of the materials of love and suffering between the future and the past. As she was doing the daily task, she used to deeply pray silently inside the secret chambers of her heart that her desire to have a son be fulfilled. And in those days, the important way to get a desire fulfilled was seek God's mercy, seek God's permission. A real bhakta always asks permission from the God. Now, science has developed so much that we can talk to doctors and get a child. We don't require God. But even then, many times things can fail. We can have a test tube baby, or we can have so many things imparted into our own body and a child can be born. But the pristine, pure way of Indian custom was seek the divine indulgence and the divine interference. So Bhuvaneshwari Devi used to regularly pray to God that she be blessed with a child. This is really a very, very profound and sublime way of doing a thing. And how artistic it is. Regularly she used to pray, and in India they used to pray to different deities in the different parts of the holy spots. If they want to have a child like Vishnu, to have a species of Vishnu, they will be praying to Vishnu in different holy spots, sending gifts, sending offerings to Sri Rangam or to some other Tirupati where Vishnu is worshipped. Those who are all devotees of Shiva, they will send to Kalahasti, to Chidambaram, to Varanasi and other places. And Bhuvaneshwari Devi, as she wanted a child, one who will be like Shiva. Shiva means one who is auspicious. She had a prayer to Shiva in Varanasi, Kashi, was called as Vireshwara Shiva. So Bhuvaneshwari Devi prayed to the Varanasi Vireshwara Shiva, And since the distance was long, she could not go directly to Varanasi immediately. She wrote to an old aunt of her family in Varanasi to ask her to make necessary offerings and prayers to Vireshwara Shiva that a son might be born to her. And when she heard that this offering and prayers were being done, she was very, very satisfied, and she was waiting in perfect assurance that her prayers will be answered and she will get a very, very pious son. Swami Vivekananda narrates about how an Indian woman prepares herself to become a mother. That is something really very touching and very, very sensitive, and it's a very, very pure and very sublime one. She used to spend most of her days in fasting and meditations, her whole soul given to constant recollectedness about Shiva, her entire heart always trying to link itself with Lord Shiva and his Leelas. And many times mentally she will visit Varanasi, seeing the pictures, so that through the thought she will get united to the Lord Shiva. And mentally she will imagine when the aunt will be pouring water on the Shivalinga, as if she herself is entering the body of the aunt, pouring Ganga on the Shivalinga, worshipping with flowers and bilva leaves, etc. So the effect of these prayers, deeply engaged and very sincere and authentic prayers, this is a Hindu belief, another beautiful aspect of Hindu life. One night she had a very, very vivid and very thrilling dream. She had spent the whole day in the shrine in a meditative mood, and as the evening shadows started lengthening and the Mother Nature pulled on the carpet of darkness, Bhuvaneshwari Devi fell asleep, hushed in the silence of her own household in silence and rest, but her mind always awake with that unconscious prayer ringing in the subconscious realm of her mind that she wants to become the mother of a son, and she has offered her prayers to Lord Shiva. Then in the highest heavens the prayer reached, and the time came for the saintly woman to touch the feet of Lord Shiva. In that beautiful dream which unfolded that night, Bhuvaneshwari Devi, the mother of Narendranath, saw Lord Shiva coming out of his transcendental meditation and take the form of a very beautiful, cute male child and being born to Bhuvaneshwari Devi as her own son. Simply shocked by this beautiful vision, Bhuvaneshwari Devi woke up. Could this be an imagination? Or could this ocean, she was drowned in an ocean of light. Could this ocean of light in which she found herself bathed totally after the dream is also a dream? She started chanting Shiva, 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 Shiva. O Lord Shiva, Ashutosha, you fulfill the prayer of many devotees. Will my dream, or is my dream an answer from you for my prayer, or is it just a passing dream? From the inmost soul of her own, Bhuvaneshwari Devi heart prayer welled up, again asking Lord Shiva that the prayers become tangible and be answered. And we find that this prayer got answered, and she had a male child which was called as Vireshwara, which in short she called as Bile, who is our great Indian youth icon, Narendranath, transformed into Swami Vivekananda by the touch of that great master of Dakshineshwar, the son of Kali, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna. So this is the touch of Shiva and the touch of the mother by which Swami Vivekananda comes to this world. Look at the beauty of the entry of Swami Vivekananda. In many of the movies you will find a new hero or a villain, how he enters, they work out how a hero is to be projected. He will enter in such a way that the whole audience in the cinema theater will be really spellbound, jumping from a plane or suddenly emerging from a sea, swimming, or coming out in a different way, which shocks the whole audience, and they feel, oh, what a marvelous feat this is. He is a hero. So Swami Vivekananda comes in a thrilling way. This is how his guru also was born. This is something fantastic, most unbelievable, that Sri Ramakrishna was born, like Jesus was born, what they call as immaculate perception without the body contact. No science can ever explain it. But Hindu super science spirituality is called the Adhyatma Vidya, Sarva Vidya Pratishtita. All the knowledge of this world are based on the Adhyatma Vidya, the knowledge of the spirit. The spiritual knowledge is the most supreme, and there in the spiritual realm, we have things which science don't even dare to enter or come near. It can't explain it. Just because science can't explain, we can't call it as a fiction of the mind or superstition or just a cock and bull story. Things are happening in India, it is happening in other countries also. Jesus was born like that to Mary, without any physical contact with Joseph. How are you going to explain it? Things have happened. And truth does not wait for the explanation of the society. Truth survives by its own majestic power. So this Narendranath, whom Sri Ramakrishna saw as the Saptarishi, through the prayers of Shiva, by the touch of the Divya Sparsha, the divine touch, comes through the body of Bhuvneshwari Devi, the motherly touch. As he was studying in the college, suddenly one day he heard of a state of mind called trance from his English professor Hastings. So Hastings was trying to explain this extraordinary state of the mind called trance and what happens at the time of trance. The mind goes into a realm where people at the lower level or at the mundane level cannot perceive. It's a super sensory perception level, which is called samadhi in Indian spiritual literature and yoga, where the sages or the person who goes into the transcendental realm sees things which ordinary man can't see. Like a man on the 10th floor can see 20 kilometers distance, while the man on the ground floor or the first floor can't see what he is seeing. So this man can predict that the man on the 10th floor must be either blind or having illusions or he's having something, visions out of narcotics or drugs. But the man on the 10th floor is able to clearly see because his mind has transcended, ascended to a higher realm where things are visible and he can perceive it. How can we call it a fake thing? People having spiritual realization, they see. Why people with spiritual realization? One day, we were going to Dakshineshwar. When I was a brahmachari in the training center of Belur Math, we were taken to Dakshineshwar. For a few minutes, we halted at the Bali bridge. Then I saw there a woman going on shouting and scolding a person. I asked one of our brahmacharis whom she is scolding. And this brahmachari told she is scolding her mother-in-law. Sasuduke domki diche. That is what he told in Bengali. Then I told, but her mother-in-law is not here. Why she is scolding? Then he told, you have not caught the point. She has lost her mind because mother-in-law was torturous. Now she is seeing mother-in-law everywhere in the mind. So even in the Bali bridge, sitting there in a very haggard dresses, having gone mad, she is scolding mother-in-law whom others are not able to see, but she is able to see. So even a mad person is able to see certain things in the world which we can't see. Similarly, a spiritual person also is able to see certain things which we can't see. So like the light at the higher vibration, we can't see. At the lower vibration, we can't see. But at the lower vibration of the light, during night, owls and cats can see. You and me cannot see. Similarly, when the ultraviolet ray spreads, we can't see. But there are other persons who can see. Swami Vivekananda used to always give this example to give an analytical discussion about the saints. Higher ranges of vibration, we can't have reach. Lower ranges of vibration, we can't have the reach. We have the reach only at the wavelength and the vibration in which we are. There are Bhuta Rashis and Preta Rashis, ghosts and others. All people don't see. Similarly, there are Devatas whom we don't see, but Sri Ramakrishna could see, Vivekananda could see, Sharda Devi could see. Even now many people are seeing. Just as mad people see something which ordinary people cannot see. But for the mad person, it is real. Similarly, but spiritual realization is more solid, more stubborn, more properly based, and it's creative, productive, and its results are infallible. So Bhuvaneshwari Devi's motherly blessings became the entry point for Swami Vivekananda, and as he heard about professor of English talking to him about trance, accidentally the professor mentioned that if you want to see a man having the experience of trance, go to Dakshineshwar. There is a great man called Ramakrishna Paramahamsa who is frequently having this experience of trance. This is what they call in India as a Shubha Muhurtam, an auspicious time. The first time Narendranath gets a hint about the future divine touch he was about to get. So the curiosity was aroused, and Narendranath, who was always wanting to know, deeply engrossed to find out whether God is real, is he existing or not, was deeply drawn by these words that there is a man in Dakshineshwar, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who frequently goes into this extraordinary state of mind called trance. Tennyson had gone into it, that state, the famous poet Tennyson. Many English poets also had this experience of trance, a sort of samadhi. Tennyson says, I simply uttered the word, I am, I am, I am, and I found I suddenly lost myself into infinity, and I was nowhere, I was everywhere. This is the formless aspect of our own Chaitanya Rupa, which Tennyson or Wordsworth experienced it. So this trance is a state of mind which yoga calls as samadhi. Now hearing this, Narendranath planned that one day he will go to Dakshineshwar to meet that man, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who is experiencing this trance. The first meeting between Narendranath and Swami Sri Ramakrishna was not something extraordinary. Narendranath had gone to Dakshineshwar just to see him and to talk to him, to see whether he has realized God or what is the experience of samadhi. But Ramakrishna, who had the foreboding of all things that were going to happen, was very anxious for and was so enamored of Narendra that he cried and prayed for 6 months even before Narendra met him, because Divine Mother had shown to him that he is the Nara Rishi who is coming with him, Narayana. Sri Ramakrishna is the Narayana and he is the Nara Rishi. Like Krishna, Narayana came with Arjuna the Nara to impart Gita to this world. Sri Ramakrishna was waiting for Narendranath to come to Dakshineshwar and meet him. Later, Sri Ramakrishna recalls the day when Narendranath meets him. In his own words, we will read, Narendra entered the room through the western door facing the Ganges. I noticed that he had no concern about his physical appearance. His hair and clothes were not tidy. Like others, he had no attachments for external objects. His eyes showed that a greater part of his mind was turned inward all the time. When I observed this, I wondered, is it possible that such a great aspirant could live in Calcutta, the home of worldly minded people? So as Narendra entered the room, Sri Ramakrishna warmly welcomed Narendranath and asked him to sit on a mat spread on the floor. And knowing that he is a good singer, Sri Ramakrishna asked Narendra to sing a song. And Narendra accented and started singing, which is a famous song, Mona Chalo Nija Niketane. It gives a beautiful indication of his personality. Let us go back once more, O mind, to our proper abode. Here in this foreign land of earth, why should we wander aimlessly in strangers' guise? How beautiful. A man from Saptarishi Mandala has come to this world where the whole life is full of stench of selfishness and greed and jealousy. So he feels this world is a land of foreign earth. Let us go back to our own abode. So the inside part of the mind of Narendranath is constantly calling him to go back to the transcendental abode of Saptarishi Mandala. As he sang that beautiful song, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly became emotional spiritually, grasped Narendranath's hands and took him into the northern porch of the Kali temple, with tears in eyes and said to him, this is worth listening now, what Sri Ramakrishna told to Narendranath. This is a touch of the great master, Sadguru Sparsham. Again, Vivekananda is getting the first touch of the great master, which will open the door for unlimited spiritual ecstasy and experiences for Swami Vivekananda, who was a stubborn atheist, rationalistic, reasoning and logical, and fully of scientific bent of mind. All those things shattered by the mystical, powerful experiences and touch of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna, with tears in his eyes, said to Narendranath, you have come so late. How unkind of you to keep me waiting so long. My ears are almost seared listening to the cheap talk of worldly people. Oh, how I have been yearning to unburden my mind with all spiritual experiences to one who will understand my thought. Then with folded hands, Sri Ramakrishna told, Hey Prabhu, what beautiful words. Sri Ramakrishna with folded hands, he says, Hey Prabhu, I know you are the ancient sage Nara, the incarnation of Narayana, born on earth to remove the miseries of mankind. Typical spiritual adventure, thrilling adventure of Ramakrishna Vivekananda. Then Ramakrishna and Narendra returned to the room and they started talking. Then Narendranath asked Sri Ramakrishna the question that was bubbling in his mind constantly. If Ramakrishna had seen or experienced God. But this time Narendranath asked Ramakrishna the same question, and Ramakrishna immediately replied in the positive without any hesitation. The words of Sri Ramakrishna were, Yes, my boy, I have seen God. I see Him as I see you here, only more clearly. God can be seen. One can talk to Him. But who cares for God? People shed torrents of tears for their wives, children, wealth and property. But who weeps for the vision of God? If one cries sincerely for God, one can surely see Him. This is the touch of certainty Swami Vivekananda, the touch of confirmation Vivekananda wanted to enliven his great hankering for God. Vivekananda was so impressed with this meeting that he started visiting Ramakrishna daily when he felt religion could be given. One touch, one glance can change a whole of life. Sajjana sangati kshanamapi eka bhavati bhavarnava tarane nauka. Shankaracharya says, one moment's association, touch of a saint or a sannyasi for a moment becomes the boat for crossing this ocean of life. Narendranath was amazed, as this was the first time he was meeting someone who could say that he had met or experienced God. Tremendous challenge to science. He also understood those were not mere words, words uttered from deep inner experiences. He left Dakshineshwar, came back to his house in Calcutta in a highly puzzled and bewildered state of mind. This was the first meeting with the Master, when the Master imparted the Guru Sparsham, the touch of the Guru, the great Master. Today we will conclude with one more touch of Sri Ramakrishna imparted to his disciple Narendranath. And we will be seeing how Sri Ramakrishna till death, he was going on giving these beautiful finishing touches to the Narendranath personality to make him the messenger of this millennia, the great prophet of this modern world, as Josephine MacLeod used to call him. The second meeting, Narendranath, the highly intelligent and scientific mind, was considering whether what he saw in Sri Ramakrishna was all madness, simply calling me as a Nara, Narayana and so many things, and he wanted to come out of that situation. So he responded to the request of Ramakrishna in the previous meeting to come again and all alone. Though at heart he was deciding whether it was possible or not. Finally, he made up his mind to meet him for the second time on another weekday. During the Narendranath was put to a more strange and mysterious experience. When he was talking to Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna suddenly placed his right foot on Narendranath's chest, and Narendranath started feeling unconscious. He felt as if everything around him, the rooms, the walls, the temple garden, they were all vanishing away. He got scared and cried out, "What are you doing? What are you doing to me? I have my parents, brothers and sisters at home." Sri Ramakrishna laughed and moved his foot away from his body. He restored his normal consciousness and said, "All right, my child, everything will happen in due time." So second time Sri Ramakrishna touches him with his legs, and the divine touch imparted to him put him again into that spellbinding ecstasy of a samadhi, where the whole personality of Swami Narendranath Vivekananda was vanishing into the indivisible. The individual was slowly merging into the individual. Individual was merging into the indivisible. But Narendranath had a divine and holy work to do. So as that personality which has come down to this earth to relieve the sufferings of the miseries of the humanity was about to get dissolved, his association with parents brought his mind back, and he shouted, "What are you doing to me? I have my parents, my brothers and sisters at home." Sri Ramakrishna understood that the prayer he had done to Mother Kali has borne fruit now. What was the prayer Sri Ramakrishna told to Mother Kali? Normally, a guru tries to relieve his disciple from the clutches of Maya, from the clutches of ignorance. One day when Narendranath was a small child in the cradle in his house, Sri Ramakrishna, knowing that the light from the Saptarishi Mandala has come and born as a child in Calcutta, on the same day he saw a light emerging out of the Varanasi street through the sky, entering into the house of a house in Calcutta, got his vision confirmed that the same light of Shiva has entered and that boy is born. So in a mystic vision, he entered into the house of Narendranath, who was a small baby on the cradle. Seeing him, Sri Ramakrishna was amazed by the purity, like Shukadeva, and understood that this boy will not stay in this world even for a moment. Therefore, Sri Ramakrishna prayed to Divine Mother Kali, telling, "Oh Mother, this man is so full of knowledge, this child is so full of knowledge, it is impossible for him to stay in this world full of stench of selfishness, misery, jealousy and crookedness. Oh Mother, put some Maya, ignorance into him." This was the prayer Sri Ramakrishna uttered, and when he touched Narendranath with his legs, and Narendranath cried out, "Oh, what are you doing to me? I have my parents, my brothers and sisters at home." Ramakrishna understood that his prayer to Divine Mother to put an element of Maya in Narendranath has succeeded. Otherwise, Narendranath, the Saptarishi, could not be tied to this mundane world. He was such a superb personality that his mind cannot stay here. But Sri Ramakrishna's prayer was so powerful that the prayer got answered, and a small amount of Maya entered into Vivekananda, binding him to this body consciousness, making him feel that he is Narendranath with Vishwanath Datta as father and Bhuvaneshwari Devi as mother. And Sri Ramakrishna says the purpose of Avatara will be served now. If he remembers that he is Avatara, he cannot stay here. Therefore, Sri Ramakrishna, many times when he revealed the real nature of Narendranath, had warned all his other disciples, never reveal this secret to Narendranath, that he is from Saptarishi Mandala, because the moment he knows or comes to know that he is from that area, that Saptarishi Mandala, he will leave his body instantly. He had a Ichcha Mrityu Varam also, boon, Ichcha Mrityu, boon to die when he wants. Therefore, it was kept as a secret. But during the last days, when somebody asked him, "Do you remember who you are?" Swamiji smiled and told, "Yes, I remember who I am, and my time for departing from this world has come." So with this experience, this superb, mystical, mysterious, puzzling and enigmatic touch, Narendra became more puzzled. and felt that Ramakrishna had hypnotized him. He also felt disgusted as he apparently, the powerful man, could not resist Ramakrishna from influencing him. Yet the purity and the spiritual profoundness and strength of Sri Ramakrishna made his mind feel that an ordinary man cannot do this. How is that a man can take the mind of a powerful young youth like a wet clay and within a moment give whatever shape he wants and again bring it back to the normal state? This was amazing, and Swami Vivekananda was shocked and spellbound by this unexplainable, enigmatic touch of Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, the great master. We have got lots of some more touches in the coming Saturdays with different episodes. Today we will try to conclude here, praying to Swami Vivekananda that may he touch us, may he give us that inspiring, holy and spiritual touch, like Sri Ramakrishna touched the devotees on the Kalpataru day, January 1st, so that we all get inspired and spiritually illumined. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.